In our last lecture, we discussed the first part of Goethe's tragedy of Faust, which was divided into two parts, the first published in 1808, and the second, which we discuss now, in 1831. It is truly a great book. The theme for us that we center around is love, and it is most certainly in both parts a story about love. But Goethe was a genius, and like any genius, and like any great book, it cannot be easily pigeonholed. Its theme is love, but it is also about ambition. And it is about that central motif of all of our lectures, wisdom. Because Faust gave his soul to know knowledge, and in the process lost wisdom. The second part is how this wisdom was reclaimed by Dr. Faust. It is thus, ultimately, a story about redemption, and its conclusion came as a surprise to many of the admirers of Goethe who saw in him the mind of the Enlightenment, unfettered by religion. Goethe lived from 1749 to 1832, and he thus lived through the great age of the Enlightenment, through the French Revolution, through the age of Napoleon, and on down to see those revolutions that shook Europe again in 1830. He was certainly educated in the values of the Enlightenment, in that admiration for Greece and Rome, that cultural belief that the ancients, Greece and Rome, could be emulated but never surpassed, that the models were the Iliad and the Aeneid. We tried to copy them, but we must recognize that we were all just standing on the shoulders of these giants. It was also an age, the Enlightenment, of universality, in which Europe was thought to be one unified culture and civilization, aristocrats speaking easily to each other across the boundaries, and culture moving very easily across the boundaries. And France was the great modern example of culture, and men like Goethe very frequently spoke and wrote in French. That was the great language of civilization. So there was the universality of knowing the classical culture and its models and ideals, and the contemporary world that also was unified in its cultural outlook. That was all shattered by the age of the French Revolution and Napoleon. Napoleon and the French Revolution had preached a doctrine of liberty and equality, but in fact the armies of France carried despotism in their wake. And in rebellion against Napoleon, not only armies like those of Prussia rose up, but whole people rose up. And the Germans and the Italians and the Spanish, in this age of repression by Napoleon, came to understand that they were unique cultures. And there arose a deep-seated belief put forth by some of the finest minds of the day, like Fichte, like Hegel, that every civilization was unique in itself. And each people, having defined itself as a nation, should develop its culture in its own way. Nowhere was this belief stronger than in Germany. And with it came a revulsion against some of the ideals of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment had taught that men and women were creatures of reason. This new age, that we can call the Romantic Age, said no. Men and women are creatures of impulse. The irrational plays a very important role in human life. That you can try to suppress emotions under a veneer of reason, but they will break out, they will erupt like a volcano. The Enlightenment had sought to control nature, and a wonderful statement of the Enlightenment ideals is a garden, carefully laid out with little fountains, little carefully cut hedges and flower gardens. The Romantic Age celebrated nature as uncontrollable, volcanoes erupting, ominous portraits of lakes amidst wild woods, a storm sweeping across. Nature could not be controlled by man. And nature was a source of eternal renewal for human beings. They should immerse themselves in nature. The poet Wordsworth celebrated, "Throw away your books and walk in a field of daffodils." That is natural beauty. And the Middle Ages, that was where you sought true enlightenment. The Enlightenment had celebrated the world of Greece and Rome. The Romantic Age said it has nothing to say to us. It's the Middle Ages. Those were the ages of Germany and France when they came into being. We love ruined castles. We love to sail along the Rhine and look at its wild mountains and ruined buildings rising up. And Christianity took on new meaning in the age of this revolution. There was a romantic sense of the life and suffering of Jesus. And some turned back to the Catholic Church as the repository of faith and of wisdom. And Goethe saw all of this come into being. And he absorbed it all. And as a genius, he stands neither in the age of the Romantics or in the age of the Enlightenment. He is unique unto himself. And the second part of the Faust is a profound examination of this question of where do cultural values lie? And is there a unique set of values for each nation? Or can we really find models? And are there standards of absolute beauty? And that, if we want to deal with the theme of beauty, is one of the most profound questions we must ask. Are there standards of beauty, as Plato says, existing forever? Or is each one of us the judge of what is beautiful? Is everything beautiful in its own way, as the song went? But these profound cultural questions are worked out by Goethe through his continuing fascination and exploration of the theme of Faust. But the second part of Faust opens out in the wilds of nature. And Faust, shattered by the experience, the death of Gretchen, his sense of having left her abandoned, is there with his old comrade, the devil. And the devil wants to know why Faust is just lounging around. After all, they have to make a living. But the first lines of the poem, this tragedy in its second part, is a little singing down from heaven of elves. In the springtime, everything turns green again, and the world becomes alive. And the little elves, the helpers of mankind, rush to and fro. And they, in this little chorus that is singing out, they have pity on the man of sorrows, whether he is good or whether he is evil. In the spring, they have pity on the man of sorrows, whether he is good or whether he is evil. Do you remember in our first part how Faust rescued himself from suicide at Easter time? Well, that is not a coincidence. Dante begins his Divine Comedy and carries his story of redemption all through the period of Easter. I don't think it is a coincidence that George Orwell, part of this great tradition, begins the story of Winston in April, for it was to be the redemption of Winston and showed how impossible that is. So Faust links the two parts by the celebration of spring and the renewal of the earth, the man of sorrows, who is Christ, but who is every man, and whether he is good or evil, he can be pitied and helped. So spring is a time of renewal, and Faust can renew himself. He can take back charge of his life and become responsible again. And he's pondering this. And the devil says, what are you doing just lying there? And Faust says, I am looking at nature. I am gaining my strength back from nature. What is nature, says the devil? It's nothing. It's just what we make. You know, you got mountains, you got volcanoes. Don't you understand that nature is a great force of renewal? No, I don't. But you can think that if you want to, right now we've got to make a living. Well, how are we going to make a living? Well, I've got a new scheme, says the devil. He is, never at a loss. Do you know much about the Holy Roman Emperor Well, nothing except he's the figurehead ruler of Germany. Exactly, Dr. Faust. And I want to go to his court. Why do you want to go to the court of the Holy Roman Emperor? What is the Holy Roman Emperor? Well, the Holy Roman Emperor, in our magical time of Faust, and right down until 1806, when Napoleon abolished the Holy Roman Empire, das Heilige Reich der Deutschen Nation, the Holy Roman Empire, das Heilige Römische Reich der Deutschen Nation, the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. They saw themselves as the direct continuation of the Emperor Augustus. They had been renewed by the Emperor Charlemagne when he had been crowned on Christmas Day in 800. And at one time, the Holy Roman Emperor, like a Charlemagne, ruled over most of Europe. But by the time of Dr. Faust, and by the time of its abolishment by Napoleon, finally in 1806, the Holy Roman Emperor was essentially a figurehead. And in the time of Faust, he ruled over, in theory, this Germany of some 365 independent principalities. Some of them large, like Bavaria, some of them nothing more than an independent knight riding around with his saddle and his horse. But each of them was independent and owed allegiance only to the Holy Roman Emperor. And the Holy Roman Emperor was elected. And so it is against this backdrop of an emperor with no real power that Faust and the devil go to his court. Of course, what is the Holy Roman Empire if we step back and analyze it? It is but the shadow of Rome and of the ancient world. And it is one more testimony, Goethe tells us, of how we have allowed the shadow of antiquity to overwhelm and oppress us. It no longer works, don't you see? Break that tie and create something new for yourself. And that will run all the way through the second part of the Faust. But Faust and the devil are there, and the devil assumes the role of the court fool. And the emperor comes out with his entourage, and he says, "Where's my old fool? I don't see him." "Oh, he just happened to fall down the steps and break his leg, but you've got a new fool." "Oh, I've got a new fool." "Yes, and he's got a wise man with him, and, well, fool, we're in a terrible situation. Listen to the reports of all of my advisors." And sure enough, the head of the Treasury says, "We are absolutely bankrupt. We have no money whatsoever." The Ministry of Justice says, "We are in a serious crisis. No one obeys the law. They run up and down the streets murdering and killing, and there's theft. Nobody takes government seriously." "Oh, this is just a terrible situation. What do you suppose we can do?" What does the Minister of the Army have to say? "Our armies will not fight. They are not paid. We cannot get justice. We cannot get soldiers because our economy is in a ruin." "Well, what am I going to do?" "I don't know." "You have very little power to do any taxation." "Well, what can I do?" Faust and the fool, the devil, have an answer. "Sire, your Majesty, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, have you ever considered all the vast resources at your disposal?" "Oh, what do you mean?" "Sire, by the ancient law of your realm, you own everything that is under the ground." Everything under the ground? Yes, you have mineral rights, we might say, to everything that is under the ground. "I do." "Yes, yes, sire." "Why is that so?" "Well, long ago, when the barbarians swarmed into the Roman Empire, many people buried great treasures under the ground to keep them safe. And the law was passed that if those treasures were ever found and the people were dead, they belonged to the state. Now, sire, what you can do is issue currency backed by those treasures." And this is Faust and the devil masquerading as the fool. This is the advice you're giving. "You mean I've got to go out and dig up all those treasures?" No, 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 no. Don't you see? Just the very fact that everybody knows treasures are in the ground ought to make your currency good. So you can print all the money you want just on the idea that there is treasure under the ground that will back it up. Well, won't that money be worthless? Won't it be like a dollar bill in your pocket that isn't backed by anything? Well, as long as people accept it in transaction, then it's good. As long as it makes the economy work. "You mean I can pay my soldiers in that money?" Of course you can. "You mean I can get rid of all the national debt with that?" Of course you can. And people will take it as long as it is backed by the government. Yes, they'll take it. This is a wonderful idea. Now we're solvent once again. And you, I am going to reward you so highly. That is tremendous economic advice. In other words, they have built an economic structure much like we have today. A service economy. Well, you know, you are such a wise man, Herr Doctor there. I would like to put you in charge of court ceremonies. And you know what everybody in my court wants to see? What do they want to see? They would like to see a reenactment of the beauties of classical antiquity. If you could put on a show like that, why, my admiration and devotion and rewards of you would be without end. Faust ponders a bit, and the devil pulls him aside. Well, we could put on a great show. All right, we'll put on a show. Now, at this time, when his empire is, of course, in such serious difficulty, this is what the emperor is thinking about, putting on a show that will revive classical antiquity. But that's what they do. And the ladies of the court come in, and the nobles of the court are there, and what Faust and the devil put on for their entertainment is a really reinvoking of classical antiquity. And suddenly, out of the mist there hovers up, created by the power of the devil, a real classical temple, let's say the Parthenon, rises in all its beauty and majesty. Now, the Parthenon and the buildings of classical antiquity are the models for the architecture of the Enlightenment. They cannot be surpassed, remember? But suddenly they see this reality of the classical world, what it was truly like. And the architects say, well, that's not a very good-looking building. Those columns look a little too squat to me. That pediment's not quite correct. Oh, that's not very good. In other words, they don't want the reality of what the classical world was. Then suddenly there's a figure that comes, and it's a man. Who is that? That is, in reality, the handsome Paris. Remember? The man Helen fell in love with, that took her away to Troy, the most handsome man of his day. Well, he doesn't look very handsome to me, the men say. Gosh, his legs are a little skinny, doesn't have much of a chest. Look at those puny little arms. That's what classical antiquity was about. Ah, well, there's a woman. That is Helen. That is the woman whose face launched 1,000 ships. Yes. The ladies say, she's tubby. She's kind of old, isn't she? Look at that little bulge around her stomach. That's beauty in the classical world. There you are. Well, of course, the economy of the empire has gone to wreck and ruin in the meantime, and Faust and the devil got to get out of there. So they head away, and they show back up at Faust Old University. And they go in. Faust opens the door of his old office, but, I mean, he's been away for a long time, and he didn't get a sabbatical. So there is his old research assistant. Remember, Wagner is now the professor. Professor, you're back. You know, I'm now in charge, but I'm so glad to have you back because I am deep in a very profound experiment. I am, what are you trying to do, says Faust? Suddenly there's a knock on the door. There's a student there, but older looking. Hi, remember me, Professor Faust? Well, not really. Don't you remember me giving me that advice? Look, here's your textbook that you wrote in. You will be like God. You will know good and evil. You don't remember that when I came by your office hours? Well, yes. You know, all my education has done nothing for me. Only real life taught me anything. I just want to say thanks for nothing. Well, that was kind of depressing, wasn't it? Well, what about your experiment there, Wagner? Well, I am creating human life in a test tube. What? I might think something like cloning. You are creating a human life. Yes, and I've just about got it there. And he's got his bellows and he's pushing away like this. Yes, and look, it's coming into life. It's coming into life. It's coming into life. There it is. And sure enough, there is this little tiny man in the test tube. Homunculus, the little man. And the little man speaks. He says, hello, Daddy, to Wagner. That's what he says. Hello, Daddy. Hello, Fatih. I have created life. And Faust says, this is amazing. I worry, though, you have created life without any love. Yes, there was no need to have the act of love whatsoever to create this little man. And look, that little man has a will of his own. I want to go with you. Where are you going? You look so interesting. Oh, well, my friend the devil and I are leaving for the south, the Mediterranean world. We're going back to the roots of classical antiquity. I want to go. Don't hold me here, Daddy. Let me go with them. I want to experience life. Well, I can't hold you back. Take that little test tube with you. So off they fly. Faust, the devil, and the little man in his little test tube. And off they fly. Faust has had enough of the dark, dank, gloomy, rainy world of Germany. And besides, the devil in Germany from time to time has to revert to a cloven hoof monster. He wants to go to the Mediterranean world where they had a different concept of the devil. And he flies down with Faust, and there they arrive. And the devil is able to conjure up the whole of the mythological world of antiquity with its nymphs and its sirens and the god Neptune. And just as the devil was able to create a devil's night in the dark Harz Mountains of Germany in our first act, now he creates a wild night of revelry in the Mediterranean classical mythological world. And the little man is right there with him, flying around, singing along in this little test tube. And he gets a ride on the back of the nymphs, these beautiful, luscious, lascivious creatures that are going to take him out into the ocean. And in the very midst of all his joy, the little man explodes. His little test tube blows up. Goodbye, Daddy. For you see, created without love, he could not survive. He could not experience real emotion since he had not been created with it, Goethe tells us. So think about cloning. Think about whether you can remove that act of love, Goethe would say to us today. But Faust goes ever deeper into the world of classical antiquity, accompanied by his friend, the devil, who seems able to make everything happen. And what would you like to do? Haven't you sold your soul for knowledge? Well, that hasn't proven to be very much good. In fact, the student has come by and said you never really taught him anything useful. But what is more important than knowledge? It is power. Power. I wanted love. That didn't work out. Gretchen was a real disappointment to me. Knowledge. I want power. I want to be a ruler. And I want to possess. I want to possess something. So why not be a ruler and possess the most beautiful woman who has ever lived? Not fool around with little Gretchens. But let's go back to Helen, because I didn't think she was that unattractive. And I want to have the most beautiful woman who ever lived. And the devil creates this for Faust. There in Sparta, where once Menelaus had ruled and Helen been his wife, Faust recreates, through the help of the devil, a new kingdom. A kingdom that is a blend between the Germanic medieval world of the knights that we met in The Death of Arthur and the classical world. And it's not a complete invention. After all, in the 14th century, Germanic knights and French knights ruled kingdoms in Greece. They had come there with the Holy Land. And come there as they had gone first to the Holy Land as part of the Crusades. And they had carved out for themselves kingdoms in Syria, in Turkey, and in Greece. And the kingdom of the Morea, the kingdom around Sparta, was just such a Teutonic medieval kingdom. So it's reality. And there is Faust as the knight, and he weds Helen. And for a while they are so happy. He has rescued her from danger. They live in their great palace, and they have a child, Euphorion. He is a blend of the world of Germany and of the classical past, of Faust and the beautiful Helen. And they go out one day with their little son Euphorion on a picnic. And he begins to dance and flit around and feel his youth and lovely looks and jumping around and just gorgeous to look upon, the perfect mixture of romantic and classical. And he finally takes such a high flight that his father and mother say, be careful, child. And his mother tries to go and get him and save him. And they perish. He falls and is broken. Because you see, culture created out of this mixture of the romantic and the classical cannot live. It is artificial. It is not reality. Each nation, Goethe has finally decided, each age must set its own standards of beauty, find its own way to art, to literature, to philosophy, and to wisdom. So the attempt to go back to the classical past has failed for Faust. He must go back once again to Germany. And once again he goes to the Holy Roman Emperor. Holy Roman Emperor is now in even more desperate states. His economy has collapsed. He can't put his army into the field, and he's about to be overrun. So Faust, aided by the devil, creates a phantom army for him. And that phantom army drives his enemies from the field, and once again, the Roman Emperor is saved. And to reward Faust, he says, I will give you what you want. What do you want now? And Faust says, what I want is a new kingdom. Something that I can create entirely fresh, not like the old classical Sparta, nothing like that. Something that I can create entirely fresh. Give me land that borders on the sea. Let me drain the sea. Let me create a new world. And let me bring people there to live and to farm that land for me. And Faust, as our work begins to draw to its close, is ruler over a vast domain. Years have passed. He is over 100 years of age, and he looks out from his palace over land filled with homes and people working so hard. The sea has been drained away, like Holland, and a new land created. It is so beautiful, says Faust, and they all labor on my behalf, but they gain prosperity and peace because I protect them. What a beautiful vista it is. Now I feel my life has been rewarded. Now I see why I wanted power, to do these good things. Oh, what is that ding-dong, ding-dong? Every time I get to a good point, like I'm going to kill myself in the first act, there's a ding-dong. Now there's a bell ringing again, a church bell. I said I didn't want any church bells. There's that little chapel. Now I thought I told my subordinates that that little chapel was to be removed. And those old people, there are two old people who live there, nice, kindly old people, but they still cling to that private property. That was the one piece of land I couldn't buy, and they got that little chapel. Now that just blocks my vision, and it irritates me. I thought I told you to take care of that business. Well, sure enough, the devil, with a couple of henchmen, runs off to take care of that business. And the next thing Faust sees is a fire. And that little farm has been burned. What did you do to those old people, said Faust. The devil said I killed them, burned down their place. You said take care of it. I didn't mean kill them. Well, you said take care of it. I didn't know how to do it. They didn't want to sell, so we killed them, burned down their place. Now it's yours. Look, I even got them to sign the deed before I killed them. Oh, what a terrible thing. Yeah, and you know what, old fellow? I think that time's getting near. You've lived an awfully long time. No. Look at the contract. The contract says that I can live until I say everything is perfect. And I'm not going to say that yet. Oh, all right. But Faust, looking out over this beautiful landscape, seeing these people hard at work, says, you know, the very fact that humans keep striving every day, that they work on and on and on, that no matter what happens, they come back, they breathe for freedom, they live for freedom, they keep striving just to look out on people living in freedom and striving every day, and every day beginning again. Why, it is such a beautiful scene. I would like to say, Verweile doch, du bist so schön. Stay for a moment. You are so beautiful. I got you now, says the devil. You said it's perfect. Now you're coming with me. I don't want to come. You're coming with me. You're going to your grave. And sure enough, the lemurs are already there digging the grave. And Faust is in the hands of the devil when suddenly a chorus appears in heaven. And the sky opens up. And a shower of roses. Remember the roses that are the sign of love? Remember the roses coming through the Gothic cathedral's rose window? A shower of roses comes down, and our eyes go up to heaven, and there kneeling is a woman, a penitent, who has been saved from her own sin. She was once called Margaret, or Gretchen, and she is praying to Mary, save the soul of Faust, save his soul. And suddenly a voice booms out, He is saved. Give him here. And the devil loses his prey. And Faust is raised up into heaven. And the chorus sings out. It's a mystery. We will never understand life. The whole of the universe is a mystery. All we can say is das ewige Weiblich sieht uns hinan. The eternal feminine raises us up to heaven. We are saved by the eternal feminine, the eternal love.